Am I audible? Am I audible? Are you able to listen to me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. So in my last class, I think we had started our discussion on the action of water, is it not? So I have told you very precisely that these are very important aspects. Every now and then these paper questions will come in the examinations. Okay. So we shall continue and finish off today the action of water. So I think you are very clear with all these things. Okay. So in my last class, we had completed a discussion till this mesas and bouquets. So today we shall continue a discussion on this aspect of the water, action of water. Waterfalls. Now, what are waterfalls? Actually, waterfalls are the ones which are the jumps that are assumed by the running water. These are the very beautiful jumps that are assumed by the running water at very specific parts, not always or not at all the points, but these are done at a very specific parts where there is a sudden and very considerable drop in the gradient of the stream or channel. See, whenever the water is running or whenever the water is flowing, there is a change in the gradient. Okay, so that change in the gradient results, or there is drop in the gradient of the channel, which results in the waterfalls. Okay, so due to the sudden change in the gradient, which means to say the water may come down at a very high speed, or what happens is the water may come down at a very that heights itself waters are assuming the waterfalls. Okay, because of the heights itself, as the water comes down or falls from a very great heights. Okay, because of that itself there is assumption of the waterfalls taking place. So what happens in waterfall, the stream literally falls instead of flowing, because of actually water flows, is it not? The water always flows, but in the case of waterfalls what happens is the water will fall down from a considerable height. Okay, usually the water will be flowing. Okay, usually the water will be flowing, but here what happens is the water falls down from a considerable depth. Okay, that is called as a waterfall. Okay, before they assume their normal flow, again once again when the water fall down, they assume their normal flow. Okay, so what happens is at the point of the fall itself, the velocity of the water increases. Okay, whenever the water flows, because it falls down from a very great heights, there is increase in the velocity, and after the increase of the velocity what happens is the water again assumes the same intensity. Once it falls down, it comes back to the normal stage. Okay, such type of the falls are usually called as the rejuvenation. Okay, whenever the water fall from a great heights or the considerable heights, the water assumes rejuvenation. So rejuvenation means punarjanma. Okay, rejuvenation means punarjanma. Water will take a new stage after it falls down once again. Okay, so that process where the water falls from a very great heights are called as a waterfall. Okay, so successive falls of the smaller heights are sometimes referred as rapids and cascades. So now Kalajgiri, most of you have seen Kalajgiri. The water does not fall from very great height, but at a very small height near the temple. So those types are called as rapids and cascades. Okay, if you go beyond that, Abhi Falls, it falls from a very great height. Even the Joke falls from around 960 meter. They are called as waterfalls. Okay, these are the waterfalls. Okay, so next are the bench-like lids that occur on the sides of many river valleys. Okay, so they are the flat surfaces which occurs on the river valleys. So from a distance, what happens is they may appear as a succession of several steps or a big natural staircase which is rising up a river bank. Okay, so sometimes what happens is they may be made up of hard rock or of soft rock, but they are very essential and they look like steps. Okay, they are very essential and they look like steps. Okay, so coming to the what are the sediments that are being transported from the river? So they are transported in three forms. One is a suspended load, another one is bed load, and finally it is a dissolved load. Okay, suspended load. What happens on the suspended load is it is traveling in the form of suspension. Okay, so now what is suspension? Suspension is a form where the particles are adsorbed on the surface, not absorbed on the surface. Okay, there are two phenomena of dissolving the materials in the particle water. One is adsorption and another one is absorption. Okay, what happens in adsorption? Adsorption is a process where the particles are stuck on the body. Absorption is the water will be dissolved, the particles will be dissolved within the particles. Okay, or the water body. Okay, don't drop your attendances now. Okay, drop in after the class is completed. Okay, who is this Jagdish? Don't drop your attendance now. Yogish Naik. These attendances will not be recorded. Okay, I'm going to delete these two. Okay. Now, what are the three methods of transportation of by the rivers? Okay, one is the sediment transportation in the form of suspended load. Suspended load on are the ones where the waters are or the particles are absorbed within the surfaces. Okay, they are transported in the state of suspension. The suspension means it is absorbed, not absorbed. The particles are not fully absorbed, but they are adhered on the top of the surface. They are attached to the particles. Okay, so next they what happens is the load that are lifted up in the stream are not allowed to touch the base due to the eddies which are caused by turbulences. Okay, so next are the bed load. Bed load are the ones where the heavier particles of the sands, the pebbles and the gravels, cobbles are all transported in the by the method of saltation. Okay, so what happens is the particles or the sediments are transported through a series of jumps. Okay, through a series of jumps the particles are being transported. Next are the dissolved load. So what happens in a dissolved load is that the materials which are soluble in water are transported by the dissolving. Okay, the particles are dissolved in the water. Okay, they are dissolved and then they are traveling. Okay, so these are the three methods where the sediments are transported by the rivers. So these are very important. It may arise in the exams also. Okay, they mention the methods of transportation of sediments by the rivers. They may ask this question also. Okay, so next is the deposition. Finally, we have seen the transportation and now we are in the deposition state. So deposition by the rivers, the entire load of stream or river will normally remain in transportation. Okay, whenever there is decrease in the load, that is carrying capacity of the stream due to whatever the reason, the whole part of the load will be dropped down. Okay, whenever the velocity decreases or any of the kinds or the particle sediments which is being heavy in nature, all these things causes the deposition of the rivers. Okay, so this process where the deposition of the rivers takes place are called as a fluvial deposits. Okay, so what are alluvial fans and the cones? See, alluvial fans are the cone shaped depositions or the accumulations of the stream deposits which are found at the places where stream rushing down from a hill slopes with a enormous debris. This is just like that in a very close to your Kedarnath and Badrinath. Okay, so what happens? The rivers of the Ganges, that are the streams of the Ganges, the Alkananda and Mandakini, flows down at a very rapid speed. Okay, the Mandakini and the Alkananda flows down at a very rapid speed, and near to Hrishikesh, where the Alkananda, Mandakini, and the Ganges meet together. So there, what happens is there is enormous amount of sediments which are carried away by the river from the Himalayas are being thrown in that places. Okay, and they form a lowland area. Okay, most of the load is spread out in all directions. Okay, so what happens is the slope of deposit is below 10 degrees, then it is called alluvial fan, and slope of deposit is 10 degrees to 50 degrees, it is called as alluvial cones. Okay, so coming to the how the alluvial fans, you can see these are the ways
where they are being deposited. You can see how alluvial fans takes place. Okay, you can see the deposition how it takes place. So it is in the form of a triangular shaped cone like structure, triangular cone like structure which are being assumed, which forms this type of deposition. Okay, so next are the floodplains. So what are floodplains? So floodplains are the parts where they are heavily loaded with the sediments of all types. Okay, so when these waters overflow the river banks, the banks on the opposite sides of the river. Okay, so the banks on the opposite sides of the river where they join together is called as a floodplains, where the water flows. Okay, where the water flows is called as a floodplains. Okay, so what happens is the water will flow all along that area, and which cause on the either sides of the banks to overflow on the banks. Okay, so many times you can see if the water are being rushed out of the dam, the adjacent areas of the places surrounding the dams, they're all flown with the water. Okay, so those places where the floods are usually common in the plain surface are called as a flood plains. Okay, so when these waters, what happens is they overflow on the river banks, they spread as enormous sheets of water in the surrounding areas, and because of their velocity, they are caused or they cause inequalities of the ground. Okay, so absence of a well-defined channel and many other obstructions will take place. So because of this consequence, what happens is they deposit most of the load that is being carried by the rivers on that places itself as a thick layer of mud. Okay, so that is a mud that is commonly seen after every major flood. Okay, you can see that mud which is being deposited will be very common. Okay, soon after floods you can see the mud that is being deposited in and around the houses. Okay, so those are nothing but the sediments that are being carried away by the rivers, that are carried by the rivers. Okay, so what happens is such process gets repeated after intervals. Those deposits are called as a, or the those areas which are very low lying areas which surrounds the major rivers are made up of actually varying thickness of the sediments. Okay, so those thickness sediments are called as a, usually they are called as a floodplain deposits because they causes the floods. Okay, they causes the floods on the either sides of the river. Okay, and those areas which are usually prone to floods which are caused by the river are called as a floodplain areas or the flood floodplains. Okay, so they are very extensive in area and hence they cause very huge destruction. Okay, so they cause very huge destruction which are called as a flood plains. Okay, so there are two types of plains. One is a convex plane and another one is a flat flood plain. Okay, convex plains are the ones which the surrounding areas are located at a lower levels compared with the river channel. Okay, so river channel will be flowing at a higher area, and these areas will be flowing lying at a lower level than the river channel. Okay, such ones are called as a convex plains because when in a cross section, you can see the convex shape of the lenses like structure. Okay. Okay. So they cause the convex structure. Okay. Flat floodplains. What happens in flat floodplains is, in flat floodplains, these appear to be very flat in cross section. Okay. And they are almost equal to that of the river stream. Okay. The flowing river stream and the lying area will almost be equal. Okay. So both of them will be equal in their heights. So those are usually called as flat floodplains, and those flat floodplains are usually made up of sand and silt sediments. Okay, so these are the floodplains. You can see how exactly these floodplains are occurring. Okay, these are the areas. Okay, so, so these are the areas. Okay, so these are the areas. These are the areas. Okay, so you can see the river banks. All along the river banks, you can see the water that has been flown because of the floods. Enormous amount of discharge of water through the river streams. Okay. So coming to the next are the deltas. Deltas are the ones which are the triangular deposits or the alluvial deposits, which are roughly triangular in shape, which are deposited by the major rivers at their mouths where they enter the sea. Okay, so deltas are quite complex in their structure because of their operation of a number of factors during their formation, evolution, and also modification. Okay, so because of all these things, they become very complex in nature. Okay, you can see this is a very typical example of a delta. You can see it is almost triangular in shape, not exactly triangular, but almost triangular in nature. Okay, so coming to the river meandering. So river meandering means these are the very important ones. The water which is flowing will not usually be in a straight position. The water will not flow in a very straight direction, but almost it takes up a horizontal position or zigzag motion. So that zigzag motion which is acquired by the stream which flows is called as a meander. Okay, so that process where the development of the zigzag type of the channel itself is made by itself is called as river meandering. Okay, if you have seen Bhadravati, if you stand on the New Bridge road and you see towards the left, the river takes a turn. Okay, so that turning is usually referred to as river meandering. Okay, so that is usually referred to as river meandering. Okay, so that are developed mostly in the middle and the lower streams where there is lateral erosion and deposition along the opposite banks that occurs. Okay, that's why in Bhadravati you can see whenever there is huge amount of water that is being left from the Bhadra dam, that is in BRP, most of the floodplains are very close to the banks of the river. Okay, that's why on the either sides of the banks you can see it gets flooded up. Okay, and also the water will gush up on the new bridge also. If there is enormous amount of water that is being released, then they will always be flooding the opposite sides. Okay, so then coming to the river meandering, you can see how exactly it is taking place. It is the zigzag motion. You can see the curved movement of the waters. Okay, so that are called as a river meandering. And finally, you can know the oxbow lakes. What are the oxbow lakes? See, oxbow lakes are the ones that are formed during the river meandering itself. So what happens is you can see the formation of oxbow lakes here also. Okay, so what happens is here the water, usually what are oxbow lakes means, see, water is flowing in this direction. Okay, so during the time what happens is after some time the water starts to flow very close, and this portion gets detached and water starts to flow in a straight line rather than a u portion. Okay, so this way where the water flows in a straight line rather than a u-shaped body, that type is called as a oxbow lakes. Those are referred to as the oxbow lakes. Okay, so the oxbow lakes are a very common features in the river meandering. Okay, so in a river meandering what happens is the oxbow lakes are very common features which are being assumed by the river meandering states. Okay, so this completes the deposition of the river. If you have got any questions you can ask me now. Okay, so drop in your attendances. We shall continue discussion next class. Thank you.